Greetings, everyone. This is Mike Riley, the voice of Ironman. And this is the Old School Tri Show with my Kiwi mates Cameron Harper and Brian Ashby. The show that talks about all things triathlon, old and new. We're powered by Ansco Foods, bringing you nutrition and good health from New Zealand's beef and lamb. Thanks for listening, everyone. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome along to another edition of the Old School Tri Show, brought to you by our friends at Ansco Foods. And today, Brian, well, big energy. It gets no bigger than someone from the Big Four, but big energy, Southern California. It's all on in today's episode.
Yeah, he did his first triathlon way back in 1976. He arrived in New Zealand as a two-time Kona world champion, went on to win 2 Ironman New Zealands, as you mentioned, from the Big Four. Quite a comedian too, the great Scott Tinley.
Ansco Foods is proud to be the new naming partner of Ironman New Zealand, ensuring every stroke, pedal and stride is powered by the best nature has to offer. Ansco Foods is on a mission to bring nutrition and good health from New Zealand's finest beef and lamb. Ansco Foods, putting the iron in Ironman with New Zealand's finest beef and lamb. Visit anscofoods.com/Ironman to find out more.
Well, one of the great perils of preparing for a chat with someone like Scott Tinley is that you do a little bit of research and suddenly you discover that this bloke's written books, and suddenly I find myself doing things like Finding Triathlon and Racing the Sunset on Amazon. So, Scott Tinley, hopefully it'll keep you in coffee for a few days anyway.
Jeez. Yeah, that and collecting aluminum cans, man. Thank you for your support, my friend.
Hey, it's great to have you on board. And you know, look, we on the Old School Tri Show, we're looking back at 40 years of Ironman New Zealand history and chatting to all the winners from over the years. And it's remarkable when we wind back the clock and we think to when you first came to New Zealand. Goodness me, you'd raced your first triathlon in 1976. That's so hard to believe. You came to New Zealand as a 2-time world champion, rocking into Auckland. What was it like in 1986? I mean, you were the kind of the Mick Jagger of Ironman, coming to New Zealand in the early days of the race.
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, Mitch, I guess he's about my age now, but
He's a bit older.
no, it was just it was such a pleasure to be able to go to different countries around the world and race on somebody else's meal ticket. You know, so I mean, there was no money, there was no prize money in '86, but you know, I mean, God, the DB Brown people and everybody involved, you know, all the Kiwis were like, oh, you know, hey, welcome to New Zealand, you know, and I brought my wife and my daughter, and like, man, I did feel like a rock star. I mean, it was such a heady moment for me, you know, to be in a different country and to feel like what I had done, which I didn't think there was much about it. Other people did. So yeah, it was fantastic, man. Just amazing memories.
So
Sorry, Cameron. I was just going to say, because Kona was expanding at that time beyond, Ironman was expanding beyond Kona. Japan and Canada was coming. Had you done any other sort of races around the globe at that point, or it had solely been in the US?
Well, let's see. 86, we had been to Nice, France. So that, you know, that race started in 82. And you know, Europe had been growing in popularity with the sport for, gosh, you know, I mean, every year it seemed to get bigger and bigger. So I'd been to Europe quite a bit. And I think I'd done a race, you know, maybe in Tahiti or some, you know, or Brazil or some exotic spot. But, you know, to your point, the Ironman as a franchise, you know, when Valerie Silk was running it, really hadn't caught on until Japan and New Zealand said, hey, you know, this is a really cool concept and it should go beyond Kona. So that was you know, something very powerful that New Zealand stepped up and became part of building, you know, the idea that Ironman doesn't exist just in Hawaii.
So, Scott, had you looked at New Zealand in 85 for the first one, or did you only sort of plan it for 86? What was the thought process behind that?
God, I have no idea.
That's a long time ago.
You got to remember that, back in '85, that, all the way back to the mid '70s, there was no professional aspect, or very little. So, I'm working part-time jobs, all the way from the mid '70s until, the mid '90s. And so, I kind of got lucky winning in Kona in '85 because nobody else showed up. And, it was only a couple weeks after Nice, and people thought they couldn't recover. And I said, well, watch this, you chickens. And so, looking at '86, I don't know exactly how it unfolded, but I do think that somebody contacted me and said, hey, do you want to come to New Zealand and have a nice vacation? Bring your family. We'll fly you over there. Air New Zealand's a sponsor. It's at a beautiful spot, St. Heliers Bay. And by the way, there's one day you have to go to work. I thought, oh, I can do that.
And you did it well. So let's talk about the actual race. Your first time there, and of course, back then, Ironman New Zealand wasn't the standard distance that we recognise today. That came a couple of years later. So as the sort of day unfolded, and your recollections of the course and all of those things, was there any sort of shell shock or anything that surprised you about the course or the day?
No. Look, I'm a 7th generation California guy, right? And my father was a surfer in Malibu in the '50s, so I watched Endless Summer, and I watched Robert August, and Mike Henson surf Raglan, back in '63, and I'm like, I want to go to that place. So when I arrived, I felt like I'm at home. I go, this is like, me going back to my grandfather's period in California. Yeah. So there was no shell shock. I was just like, I love the spot, and the world goes to shit. This is where I'm going to end up if you let me in.
Just before we get on to the rest of the race, did you get down to Raglan for a surf?
I did. I did get to Raglan. Yeah, and it wasn't big, but I checked that box, and it was pretty magical.
It's got that wonderful left-hand break, and Raglan is just worldwide awesome. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Anyway,
yeah. Sorry. Back to the race. Sorry, Brian.
Yeah, well, yeah. Just tell us about the race. Obviously,
let's see, 85. How did I do in that race? Remind me.
86. 86.
Well, you were first on the water, and
did I win?
Yeah, you won. Yeah, you won. You had to. There was a Kiwi guy called Glenn Davies who kind of smashed out the bike early on, and kind of hauled him in. Yeah.
How was Glenn Davies? I remember that guy. He loved his DB Brown.
Well, I think all you guys did back then. There's pictures of the first year of Melina enjoying a few in '85 and so on, and I think that was one of the. It seems to be that was one of the big attractions for people, that everyone liked the post-race beer.
Yeah. It was just something about the camaraderie and the esprit de corps. And people coming together in a foreign country from different places, and sharing a moment, and there was some pressure, like to kind of make a name for yourself in the sport. But I remember in '86, there's no prize money, right? Nobody's handing you a check for $100,000. So I don't know. I think that we generally enjoyed each other's company and the opportunity to do something interesting and unique. And avoid getting a real job. And so, there was, and by the way, there was beer. So,
Yeah.
It must be cool though, Scott, when, like you alluded to it before, that you're living in California and then suddenly you got this opportunity to fly right across the Pacific Ocean and race in another location, take your family with you. I mean, you're young, you're fit. I mean, that's pretty cool in itself.
No, for sure. It was one of those pinch me moments. You're just sitting there going like, what did I do in a former life? Save a busload of nuns that went off a cliff and they're burning, and I pulled them all out and saved them. And wow, you're going to be rewarded because you get to go to New Zealand and party like a rock star, and they're going to pay your tab.
Did you like the Auckland course? Was the Auckland course? Was it like was it a Tinley course? Did it work for you?
Oh, it was tough.
Yeah.
I don't remember how many feet of elevation changed on the bike and the run, but God, I mean, I just remember thinking, man, okay, this is a major urban environment, and within 3 miles, suddenly we're in these, they called them undulating hills. Like, well, that's not an undulating hill; it's a freaking mountain. So, but that was tough,
Yeah.
But I liked it, and of course there was people everywhere. You'd be going down this long deserted road and you think, okay, I'm out in the hinterland. Nobody knows I'm here. You come around a corner, and there's 200 people from a little village like cheering you on, and they have your name on a piece of cardboard, and you go, what? How do you know who I am?
Yeah. Well, back in those days, the state broadcaster TVNZ would televise the race too. So it had a really big national profile, of course, as well. So, beyond the locals in Auckland, people around the country kind of knew who you were and so on. It's probably a profile the race would enjoy having nowadays, really. It's become so niche.
No, I mean, those were, like I said, those were heady memories. And gosh, that first year, when you go to a place and you win and you think, gosh, how lucky am I? And then you think, who did I beat? Was Dave Scott and Mark Allen and Scott Molina and Mike Pigg, and were they all there? Yeah, they weren't there. So all right, let's see what happens when they come to New Zealand, because suddenly they're going to discover it, like Ray Browning did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll come to Ray in a moment, because 2 years later you had a wonderful battle. But just you were a two-time world champion and so on, and you'd raced on the biggest stage in Ironman, and globally you were well established. But what was the atmosphere and vibe like in the finishing shoot in Auckland, winning that race in 1986? Do you recall that?
You know what, Brian? It felt like a small town had come out to welcome you. And there weren't thousands of people. There weren't these giant grandstands. There weren't all these cameras, but everybody who was there was like, "Oh, Mike, welcome to New Zealand. Come on over." And it was like everybody. Suddenly, I had 200 best friends, and these people, they didn't want to hang out with me because I won the race. They were just like, okay, here's some guys from California, and seems to be, somewhat of a nice bloke. And anyway, I just felt so welcomed by everybody.
Yeah. So you mentioned Ray Browning, and 2 years later you're back in 1988, and goodness me, it was the first time that Ironman New Zealand had two previous winners on the start line in the men's race, in the form of yourself and Ray, who'd won the previous year. How much did you know about Ray at that point going into the race?
Well, the short of it is, Ray and I are good friends, always have been, always will be. But I've always felt like I was a step behind him in everything he did. Like he did these Ironmans in New Zealand and Japan and Canada before me. And so I go, okay, I'm following Ray. And even when he goes back to school and gets his dissertation and goes into academia, he's always a step ahead of me. So every time I see him, I go, whatever you do, just let me know so I can follow you.
Nice.
But no, he's a brilliant guy, and we were good friends, and it was a very poignant moment when I got off the bike and knew, I was probably 11 minutes behind him. Yeah. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a great ride Ray had, and he had a great swim, and I liked this guy a lot. But you know what? Fuck it. I'm going after him.
Yeah.
And then, I started chipping away at the time, and it was like, okay, 8 minutes behind, 7 minutes behind, and then you get down on the wharf and I'm only 2 minutes behind. I go, oh my, he's going to be so bummed when I pass him.
You caught him maybe a mile or two to go.
Yeah. And I looked at him and he looked at me and he kind of had this hangdog look like, oh my God, Tinley, are you fucking kidding me? You And I'm like, Ray, I'm so sorry, my friend. Like, I'll buy you a beer tonight. You can go with me. Like, I'm going to pick it up. I'm feeling really good right now. You know, I ended up running like 242 or 243 for the marathon. And I go, look, come with me. Let's sprint. And he goes, fuck it. You're out of here.
Oh, brilliant. And because the other thing, Scott, with this race, of course, in '88, it's the first time that they have stepped it up to the 3.8, 180, and the full marathon. So it's kind of a change in the dynamic. And I just wonder, Ray Browning had a thought on that. He preferred and I think he still stands by this. He preferred the shorter format and felt that Kona should be the 3.8, 180, and 42. Did you have a sort of a strong view either way on that?
Well, I mean, from the very early periods of triathlon, one of the dominant narratives and discussion was what is fair, with respect to distances across the disciplines. And, of course, Ironman comes to us from historical bases. And that's, in a lot of ways, that's important. But it does disfavor the swimmers. And it even kind of disfavors the cyclists in some way. So if you're a really strong runner, right, it works in your advantage, particularly in the order that was established early on in triathlon. So, but to Ray's point, I do think that the earlier distances probably are more fair, and perhaps more importantly, they're less damaging to the body. So, that's something we can talk about later. But in any case, I would agree with Ray that those earlier distances made for a more dynamic and perhaps closer competition.
Yeah. Because that year in '88, you had the World Series going on as well. Yeah. So, you talk about damage to the bodies and stuff. You guys were doing a lot of big racing.
Yeah, and they're bringing that back now, Ironman. Yeah. This World Series thing, which I am vehemently opposed to, because it puts young athletes in a position where they're perhaps going to have to compromise their body, even gladiatorialize it. And, a lot of us who got sucked into that paradigm back in the day, because we're just looking to pay the bills and have experiences and get on with our lives. And now we're paying the price, in lots of physiological ways. I am very much opposed to Ironman as a corporation, as a for-profit structure, for not utilizing their platform to explain to everybody the physiological cost. And I don't know who has to do that. I don't want to be that guy, but maybe I have to be. But somebody has to say, hey guys, before you jump into that arena, weigh the cost. So, anyways. I'll get off that soapbox.
Scott, are you paying a cost now? How's your body?
Oh, I've had 2 hips resurfaced. I have cardiac issues. Look, I'm fighting the good fight, right? I'm alive and I'm still doing my shit. But and I can tell you that Dave Scott, and I'm not, perhaps less so with Mark Allen and Scott Molina, because they were a little smarter, but. I know that a lot of people who followed that, that golden orb, looking for some remuneration or some sort of, adulation for their experiences. We don't regret it, but we wish we had better knowledge about the science then.
Yeah.
It's the Jim Fixx syndrome, right? He wrote the book, and then he died of cardiac disease.
Yeah. Do you think though, Scott, that if you cast your mind back to when you were in your prime of racing, do you think when people are young, and like I was saying before, you're young, you're fit, you feel bulletproof, do you think that looking back with the benefit of hindsight, and don't get me wrong, I agree people should understand the risks before taking anything on. But I guess where I'm coming from is, do you think athletes, when they're right in that heady moment of entering races and they're doing well, are actually going to think to themselves, you know what, I should probably ease this back? Or are they in a mindset where, you know what, I'm just going to keep racing, it'll be okay?
No, you're exactly right. Look, when we are young and when we're, to your point, immortal, and we think, gosh, I've got one shot at this, and whether it's about financial compensation or adulation or self-worth, whatever motivates you, you're not thinking about long-term sustainable health.
Yeah.
And I get it. Look, I was there. I wouldn't change anything. But all I'm suggesting is that now that we have more advanced science and we understand the risk of going down that rabbit hole, that level of science, no different than the concussion crisis, that finally has come out with respect, to American gridiron style football, that somebody, and it ain't going to be Ironman because, that's a for-profit venture capital organization. Somebody should come out and say, hey guys, before you try and do 4 Ironmans in a 12-month period, just know the risks. That's all I'm suggesting.
Yeah. Your career sort of just kept rolling on. It was such a long career, and you sort of the first couple of years of coming to New Zealand, Scott, you'd sort of race, not race, race, not race. Then you sort of 3 in a row, and goodness me, from 90 to 92, what remarkable races they were in terms of the people that were on the start line with you and the battles. And I guess, sort of coming back in 1990, you've had 2 magnificent wins. You had a wonderful podium, a 3rd place in 1990, Molina and Browning behind you. But kind of people kind of forgot about a good race, Tinley in 3rd place, because of the insanity of what went on in front of you with Pauli Kieru and Ken Clark.
Yeah, well, look, I appreciate those people immensely because, they were kind of the journeymen. They just they didn't win Ironman, and they just kept slugging it out, and week after week, country after country. So people like Kenny Glaw and Pauli Kieru and Jimmy Riccatello, Ray Browning, Paul Huddle, the list goes on and on. These people were they were the foundation of the professional side of sport. Forget the whole big 4. We kind of got lucky, be honest with you. It could have been any big 4. But these guys were just, they were just hardcore, and they're just slugging out. They're trying to make $30,000 a year and pay the rent. And so, man, I just tip my hat to those guys all day long.
Yeah. Do you remember much about that race that day?
No, I was third. I was stuck in the back. I didn't see it. How was it?
Can you see that on the webcam? Can you see?
I remember that picture.
That's 1990. Pauli Kieru and Kenny Glass.
Oh yeah.
It might be a bit blurry for the people watching, but the in the finish, it was the 2 of them just a full on, just go for it sprint, and Pauli got it by a body length.
Yeah.
Those guys are awesome, man. They're just amazing people.
It's interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine recently who's a triathlon coach here in Auckland, and he was watching these races as a schoolboy, and I just rang him up just to have a general chat, as you do to your friends, and said, what was your memories? I said, we're going to be talking to Scott Tinley, and he goes, man, my memories of Scott Tinley is him running down the waterfront with his M-frame glasses on, blue Speedo, white Tinley singlet and the visor on, just California blonde hair and the moustache, and just gliding down the waterfront. He said it was just the most beautiful thing he's ever seen in triathlon.
Oh God! Well, that didn't get me laid. So what will? Kidding me? That's nice of him. That's nice of him. Yeah, I don't know. That whole St. Helier's Bay area is just so idyllic. That my gosh, I can't remember one year. I think it was one of the years after I won, Air New Zealand says, hey, why don't you come back and we're going to give you 4 first class tickets. So I invited my mother and father-in-law, anyways, and they came down and, they set them all up and they treated them like royalty. And I don't know, it was the most amazing thing. And unfortunately, I had an injury. I didn't finish the race, but they just came to me and said, Scotty, this place is amazing. And I can't believe how famous you are. It's like, my mom finally figures out that, I'm something, not just dirtbag surfer kid, who barely got out of high school.
Yeah. Brilliant.
So I had another quick question. It was not really related to Ironman, but you were saying before 7th generation Californian, which is incredible. And so you grew up surfing the coast and you're a lifeguard and just hanging out and doing the beach life when you're a kid, when you're growing up.
Yeah, I know. And I still don't want to grow up. So just, I surfed this morning and it's like, all right, I got,
Yeah. Yeah, and you're still a clubby. You're still in the lifeguard tower.
I am. Yeah, I'm 67 years old now. Believe that. And I'm still working weekends and teaching junior guards in the summer, and I'm hoping to make it to 70.
Yeah.
So that's my goal. And of course, the Southern California scene is it's not as organized as as Australia and New Zealand as far as the club systems, but we do what we can. Del Mar, where I work, we actually have a reciprocity deal with some Auckland guards from one of the beaches up there, and they send us a couple of guards, and occasionally we send a couple of guys down there, and it works out well. So.
I know. Later in the year, some friends of ours, they're guards. They're going to Huntington Beach, and then they've got some guards coming over in the new year to West Auckland, one of our beaches. So the reciprocal thing happens a lot. It's great.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's magic. So because you guys get away with a bunch of stuff that we can't do. Particularly driving the IRBs. The little inflatable rescue boats. You guys own that stuff, and. We're always being watched by cities and municipalities and everybody with a camera who's trying to bust us for making a mistake. And
really?
And so we send our guards down there to actually learn how to drive the boats well.
Yeah.
Because you can do crazy shit and no one's going to bug you. So
yeah. Hey, Scott, let's stay out on this surf lifesaving thing because and we'll wind the clock right back. Is that I mentioned early on that back in '76 you did your first triathlon. Is that where it came from? Did it come from the surf lifesaving background and so on? Just explain how you kind of got into the sport in the early days.
Well, yes and no. There wasn't much happening in triathlon anywhere except for my neighborhood. I'm living on Mission Bay in San Diego. In 75, and then I see this race and I go, wow, oh my gosh, that thing's amazing. When's the next one? And here's these guys from the San Diego Track Club going, I don't know, maybe next year we'll have one. So you look for the flyers, posted up against the bathroom wall, and you talk to people, and everybody near the beach is interested in that kind of thing, and we're all cross training before cross training becomes a term. Yeah. And then, it happens and you jump in, you go, wow, that's super fun. Let's keep this thing going.
Yeah.
But a lot of it had to do with, that early beach, Southern California lifestyle, lifeguarding, working in the restaurant at night, going to college. You can't afford a car, so you ride your bike, and you run because you don't want to get fat from drinking too much beer. And there it is,
Yeah. And so, like when Ironman started in Kona in 78, did you sort of look across the sea and think, look, these guys are just batshit crazy? Did it seem as Ironman still does to many people? They just think they look at the distances and just think it's insanity. What was your sort of perception of what Ironman was back then?
Well, so I was friends with Tom Warren, who won the Ironman in 79. And, he had been competing in some of the early events around San Diego, from 74 on. And he was a barkeep. And, I'd go down Thursday night and pay my $1.29 and, get a rolled taco and a, half a draft beer. And then after he won in 79, he said, "Hey, you should look at this thing because I know you've heard about it, but it's pretty cool and it's hard, but even a guy like me could win this thing." And he says, "I think you have potential." And then the article by Barry McDermott came out in May of 79 in Sports Illustrated about Tom Warren and his accomplishment. And that was, cliche alert, but that was a game changer. Everybody looked at that and went, "Oh my gosh, this is the real thing." And so I had heard about it, I knew about it, and I said, "I'm going to do that." And unfortunately, I couldn't do it in 1980, which is probably a good thing because Dave Scott showed up and just beat the crowd by an hour.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how it got going.
Yeah,
So when you lined up in Kona for the first time, did you have any expectation about this, or had you spoken to people like Tom and others enough to understand what you were probably up for?
Well, yes and no. I knew it was hard, but I just started a new job. I left my career as a firefighter paramedic, thinking, I don't want to do that. And I had done some training, but I was just so naive. I had this bike that, I had bought it, a swap meet, for $100, and I had a big tank top wearing because I thought that would cool me off, and I'm wearing touring shoes, and the toolkit with vice grips and duct tape, and baling wire in case anything could happen. It was so naive, and all I wanted to do was finish. And that was my goal. And I don't know. I had a very average swim, but I had a decent bike, and I think I came off the bike, like 50th, and ran my way into third.
Wow.
And then I remember thinking, okay, this is a curse, because I remember thinking that because I had done well enough with no experience and no training and no understanding of how cycling works, I'm going to have to go back again and again and again and again. And there it was. It was like, but quite honestly, the feeling that I got from ending up third with absolutely no expectations was as powerful, if not more powerful, than my 2 wins.
Yeah.
Because it was just so unexpected and so jubilant and so, innocent. I just remember laying there going "Oh my God," looking at my wife, she goes, "Wow, you just got third in this huge event." And I go, "Oh my God, what do we do next?" She goes, "I don't know, go back to sleep."
I think is, Scott, I think you've actually just become an honorary Kiwi because you raced with duct tape, and I think that's really important. That's a very New Zealand thing. So that's
really duct tape.
Yeah. Duct tape fixes everything.
Everything.
Like,
Yeah. Hopefully,
Love
it might even fix our economy one day. Hopefully. Yeah. But
That's funny.
the thing is, though, Scott, I mean, it must be. I mean, a few people we've talked to on the podcast here, we talk to them about racing without expectation. And if you ever get a chance to do that, which you did in that first race, that first Ironman, that you didn't know what was going to happen, and like you said, it's the purity of racing without that pressure on you, just to get out there and get going. It's awesome.
Yeah, and you kind of wish that still existed.
Yeah.
But look, I teach sociology of sport, right? And it's part of my business is realizing that there's so many factors that put pressure on people from so many places, social media, family, friends, and they, it's hard to be innocent in the world of sports anymore. because everybody, whether it's a sponsor, a family, a friend, a lover, whatever,
Yeah.
they want you to perform. And if you don't, then, you really have to be incredibly self-actualized not to feel those pressures.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It just,
Oh yeah.
it's hard. It's hard to feel that innocence anymore.
And there's
Yeah.
plenty of athletes, regardless of whether they're professional or just, regular people trying to do any sort of race, that, quite often it's literally expectation. They can't deal with that. It's that mental game for them is just too hard, and they give up the sport, unfortunately.
Yeah. And that's the worst thing. You're leaving it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
You're leaving it because somebody else is inferring that you're not good enough. And and again, some of that, some of it comes from media, some of it comes from, the corporatization of the sport. Some of it comes from the whole Ironmanization of sport. And I don't know, I guess somebody asked me the other day, what's wrong with the sport? And I said, I can't say exactly, but it's inaccessible. It's too expensive, and there's too many expectations that to be legitimate, you have to do an Ironman distance. What's wrong with a sprint? I'd be happy to finish the sprint right now. If I can swim 1,000 yards, and ride my bike, 12 miles and run 5K and finish and have a beer with my friends, I'm happy.
Yeah, that's solid.
It's interesting though, Scott, because I was talking to a guy yesterday, and he's racing. There's a small sprint race in Auckland today, actually, and he. I said to him, "You're looking forward to it," and he was so excited. He was so excited to get out there, and he had his bike, probably with duct tape on it, but he had his bike, and he had his shoes, and he had his wetsuit, and he was just so excited about getting out there and racing. And I said, "How do you think you'll go?" He said, "I don't care, man. I'm racing." I was like, "Good on you. That's amazing."
No, for sure. Well, we hope that there are more people like your friends.
Yeah.
So, but that's because that's what drives the sport. It's a bottom-up model. It's not the big four. It's not winning Kona. That's the half of 1%.
Yeah.
It's the hundreds of thousands of perhaps millions of people around the globe who want to be just like your friend. That's what's going to make the sport, completely legitimate. To make it, running or tennis or, and I think some of that has gone away with the focus on the ultra distance events and the Olympics, and the demise of some of the the really interesting, small, affordable, accessible events.
And I guess it's hard as an event organizer. I don't know what it's like in California, Scott, but I know in plenty of other parts of the world, including New Zealand, it's hard for these guys to, with health and safety and road closures, and it's expensive to put events on, isn't it?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a tough position on both sides.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think that enough athletes realize how hard it is to produce an event. To your point, it is expensive. It's risky. You've got insurance. You got people want to sue you because, they had bad breath in the morning, and it just goes on and on and on. And so race directors, got more and more like, why am I doing this? It was a labor of love, and now I don't feel any love. So, I'll move on to something else.
Yeah. Scott, let's look at your last couple of races in New Zealand and your recollections in '91. Second placing there, and Dirk Ashmane coming through and winning it. Molina in third place. Gosh, we've got Kropko, Huddle up there again. Like a cast of rock stars. What can you recall of that day in 1991?
Not much.
Not much. Yeah.
I don't know. That's I remember, Dirk was he was charging then. He'd been training super hard. He's very interested in doing well in these events. And of course, Scott Molina, always a threat, never know what to expect. And, you know, I think that was, you know, the early 90s were the beginning of the Europeans really making a statement around the world.
Yeah.
And you know, that was such a positive thing because, you know, that suggested that the sport was going global. And then it wasn't just a San Diego, California, or USA thing. And so, you know, yeah, I would love to have won, but, you know, in hindsight, just thinking about, you know, that finally we had international presence in New Zealand with all these different, you know, athletes from around the world. I mean, that was a cool thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. In 92, again, you podiumed and third place behind Stephen Coleman and Ken Glar getting his first win. But you're done with New Zealand. But my word, you were still after a long career. You sort of went on and had wins in Japan and Canada, and I think you had some Xterra sort of thrown in there as well.
yeah, well, let's see, 92. Gosh, you know, I would have been 36, 37. I'm like, all right, well, I'm just milking this thing now, right? They should be putting me out to pasture. But you know what? I do remember after when I beat Ray 88, you know, thinking, oh my gosh, okay, I just had a seamless, near perfect race. No pain, got off the bike, ran 2:43, you know, didn't even feel sore the next day. I thought, okay, well, what facilitated that? You know, what got me there? Was it training? Was it nutrition? Was it my attitude? You know, I had no idea. So I created this whole log. You had like, you know, a 15-page rubric of what I needed to do so that I could replicate that. And then, I don't know, 2 months later or the year later, it's like, oh, I'm going to go to Japan, do the exact same thing. And I completely bonked. I had to walk the last 3 miles. I go, well, apparently that didn't work out that well. So, but no, it was all that. The Ironman World Series completely fucked me. Look, let's just be honest with that. And you know, all those 3 years of doing not only 4 Ironman events, but you throw in Nice and you throw in another ultra distance event, and then you know, and all those things of trying to like just you know race as many times as you can to pay the mortgage, you know, support the new baby. Then you know, by 92, I was kind of done. Yeah. And you know, I look historically at what Dave Scott, Mark Allen, and Scott Molina did, and they all took a year off somewhere, you know, in the latter part of their careers. They just said, I'm going to just chill for a year, focus on something else. And all of those guys came back even stronger.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Dave Scott, Mark Allen, 89 in the Iron War. You know, Scott Molina raced, you know, very well, you know, into the early 90s. And I never did that. And I really should have. So again, you know, it's one of those things where you wish you would have known then what you know now, but you know, we did what we had to do. And then, you know, and then the whole off-road thing came around. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is kind of cool. And Ray Browning and I and Jimmy Riccatella, you know, the only guys who actually had gotten into mountain bike racing early on, we're all looking at each other going like, all of our friends can't even go down a little bunny hill. These guys are lame. You know, I looked at Mark Allen and Dave Scott on a bike. I go, I could put 10 minutes on you on a mountain bike in 20K because it's so lame. Yeah. And so we all looked at each other and we're like, okay, this is going to buy us another couple of years of not having to get a real job. Yeah. So we totally got into the Xterra stuff, and it was magic. We had so much fun, and all the people who organized that were just all about, you know, the original idea of just, you know, getting together and partying and racing hard. And so those were fun times.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
When was it, Scott, that you went? You know what you were saying before that I got another couple of years out of this. When was it that you went? You know what? I need to go and get a job or further my career and take a new direction from racing now.
Yeah, that was 99. And I was like, I was 42. And, my wife looked at me and she goes, look, we have 2 kids now. And guess what, hun? You ain't winning races no more. In fact, you're not in the top 10. What are you going to do when you grow up? And so I looked around and I'm like, okay, well, I have options. I can be a salesperson. I can go back and, fire department. I can, be a salesman or, I don't know, marketer, or, stand next to Mike Riley and talk about things. And none of those sounded very fun to me. So, I remember, like, to this day, the moment I sat down, I said, Virginia, it's my wife, I said, I have an idea. I'm going back to the crossroads. What do you mean the crossroads? I'm going back to 1982 when I started to be a professional athlete. I was in graduate school and I was working on the beach as a lifeguard. I was teaching sailing. I'm going back there. And she just looked at me and shook her head and she said, well, good luck to you, man. I hope it works out. And that's what I did. I went back to school. I went back to working on the beach. And, for some reason, all the planets aligned and, 10 years sitting in graduate school and raising my hand and sitting in a little desk and working on the beach again. It's like, and now I'm golden. I'm like, really? I made the right decision. So
Brilliant. And so work-wise, just explain your professional life now.
So I've actually been a professor at the university longer than I was a professional athlete, which is interesting because, for a long time, people would come up to me and say like, oh yeah, I used to race against you, back in 84. And now I've been teaching and, some of my students a few years ago, would be, oh, you know what? My dad used to race against you. And I thought, okay, well, that's great. I remember him. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And then just last week, one of my students came up to me and she said, you don't talk about your past and your career, but I Googled you. And I want to tell you that I was telling my grandfather about you and he used to race against you. I said, get out of here. So anyways, yeah. So I am fully tenured, fully golden at the university and I teach in the sport humanities of an exercise science department. And I have one of the best jobs on the planet. Sometimes I come home and I think, oh my gosh, I sat around with a bunch of smart kids and I got to talk about sports and they paid me for that. Come on, man. I would pay them, pay the state of California, right? Because I'm very, very fortunate, very happy.
It's amazing though, Scott, if you look at the full circle of your career, it's almost like if there's someone like you back in the late 70s, it would be amazing to understand how it would have all panned out, I guess. Like someone there to be able to teach these kids about what it's like, the sociology of sport, and to understand what they're up for. It would have been interesting to see how it all worked out over the years.
Yeah, those people are out there, and they were some of my mentors, people I would meet at conferences and unfortunately some of them have passed or they're retired or they're just old and gosh, these a lot of these guys are like more heroes to me than people in sport because they understood, how sport functions in society and they were able to write books and publish and teach and to transfer that knowledge. And to me, perhaps that's way more important than, somebody, handing you money or a trophy saying, hey, you're great for today. But these guys were like great, every day for a lot of people. So they're out there. And kudos to those people who sort of, built that empire.
couple of quick questions before we let you go, and we're really grateful for your time, Scott. True or false, or is it an urban myth, or is it true? Were you the first to use aero bars in triathlon at Hawaii in '81? Had other people used them at that point?
So let's see. The first time I used aero bars, they weren't the same sort of hands together style that was developed by Richard Bryant and then Boone Lennon from Scott, USA. But they were kind of a delta wing style, and they were developed by a guy named Gary Hooker, who did Hooker headers. I don't know whether he ever imported those to New Zealand, but it was a fiberglass delta wing style, but they didn't bring your hands together. And that was 85. The first people who actually used, the hands together downhill style aero bar, that was in 87 at the Desert Princess duathlon in Palm Springs. That was Brad Kearns and one of his buddies, and they had gotten these things from Boone Lennon, from Scott. And I saw Brad in the transition area, setting up, and I came over and looked at his handlebars, and I go, Brad, what is that? Some kind of sprinkler system? That's ridiculous. That is, I can't believe it. Anyways, he went by me, into the wind, going 6 miles an hour faster than me. And we finished. I said, okay, I take it all back. Where do I get them?
Brilliant. And Scott, and the final question that I've got for you, Cameron may have something, but I look at your first world title in '82, and what a magnificent moment. And then the sport suddenly, the whole world catches on to it. Not because you've done something amazing and won a world title, but the wonderful Julie Moss crawls across the finish line and kind of steals your thunder. Do you feel a bit ripped off? Have you had an ongoing grudge with Julie all these years?
No, that was such a magic moment, not only for her, but for the sport.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of backstory on how that all unfolded, which is interesting enough. But no, are you kidding me? It's like, because without people like Julie, and without ABC Sports, and without the media, and without all of these different corporate incentives building up the sport, then I don't get to cruise around the world and get paid to travel for free. So every time I see Julie, I go, thank you for pooping your pants, because that gave me like 10 years not having to get a real job. So,
well, we love Julie. She's been a great supporter of Ironman New Zealand over the years, and has come back regularly for, from day one till even recent years in Taupo. So I'm sure at some point we'll chat with her on the Old School Tri Show as well.
Yeah, no, Julie's awesome. So that's amazing.
The only thing I sort of wanted to cover off towards the end of this, Scott, was another, I guess, string to your bow, and that is Scott Tinley, author, and the writing you've done over the years. And Brian was saying he's bought some of your books on Amazon, but you're an accomplished author as well. Talk us through that. It's a real creative outlet for you.
Yeah. Well, that was what I wanted to do before I got into triathlon. And fortunately, Bill Katowski, who started Triathlete magazine, in '84, he came up to me and says, "Hey, you're kind of a quippish guy with a sense of humor, and you're kind of cynical and you're kind of an asshole. So I want you in my magazine." I don't know how to take that, but all right, put me on the back page. So that's how that all started. And then, from there it was just, writing books and thinking about what was interesting to me. It's been a great journey for me, to be able to write my books I hope that I can continue in that vein in some respect. And here's a good side note. It's the only job I ever got fired from. ever.
Oh.
They fired me from the back page of Triathlete magazine because not only was I not writing about triathlon, I wasn't even writing about sport. I'd gone completely off the deep end. I don't know what I was thinking or doing. And so the editors were like, can't you even, bring it slightly back to triathlon? I said, I don't think so. So they fired me. And I should have been fired. So
Oh, it's brilliant. I think one of my big lessons from today is that we're all filling out our CVs and our LinkedIn profiles wrong. We need to say, I'm a bit of an asshole. That's
I don't know. Humility is probably the hardest human trait to learn, don't you think? I mean,
Yeah, it is.
It's pretty easy to think we're all that great, but to try to realize we ain't that bitching. That's a tough one.
Yeah. Oh man. Look, we are so grateful for your time, Scott, today, and it's so brilliant that you have joined us on the Old School Tri Show.
Yeah. Hey, listen,
you're living your best life, and that's just tremendous. So thank you so much.
I appreciate the thought. Shout out to Cam Brown.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of ex-pros and whatnot, come and gone. Some I admire, some I less than admire. Cam Brown's near the top of the list. Great athlete, good family guy, super good person. So, him and Melina, those are like, I think and Aaron, right? And Melina's sort of like, quasi-Kiwi, but those are some of my favorite Kiwis. Besides you guys, of course.
Do you know what? Last weekend I was at a local race here in Christchurch. Melina had the orange vest on and he was helping Marshall and helping pack bikes and things, and Aaron was there supporting and stuff. They are just great people. They are great people. So I will pass that on to them for you, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, think about baseball. You go down to Little League Baseball and there's Ted Williams, oiling up some kid's mitt or something. These guys are like, they're legends that are just honest and humble and paying it forward. So.
And it's interesting you mentioned Cam Brown. I mean, Ryan and I obviously know Brownie very well. And this latest edition of Ironman New Zealand, he didn't race at that, but he volunteered. He was there and people couldn't quite get their heads around the fact that he was in an aid station handing out drinks on the course.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the kind of people that you want in our sport, and then you admire, and you just you want them to teach your kids, how to be a good person.
Yeah.
So
absolutely, Scott Tinley, thank you so much for your time. Thanks.
My pleasure, you guys. I'm sorry about the video, but like I said, you use the pictures of me when I was cute, and good luck with everything, my friends.